reading from Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. It's in the prologue, Beginner's Mind. And we talked about that last week in terms of the Dharma talk. So we're going to continue to talk a bit about Beginner's Mind. And I'm going to do that by going into actually the chapter in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind on control. To live in the realm of Buddha nature means to die as a small being, moment after moment. When we lose our balance, we die. But at the same time, we also develop ourselves. We grow. Whatever we see is changing, losing its balance. The reason everything looks beautiful is because it is out of balance. But its background is always in perfect harmony. This is how everything exists in the realm of Buddha nature, losing its balance against a background of perfect balance. So if you see things without realizing the background of Buddha nature, everything appears to be in the form of suffering. But if you understand the background of existence, you realize that suffering itself is how we live and how we extend our life. So in Zen, sometimes we emphasize the imbalance or disorder of life. So last week, we were talking about beginner's mind as, what are the things we talked about beginner's mind? Do people remember? I framed it in several ways. Anybody want to yell out what they remember? All right. No one. Okay, that's fine. I'll remind you. Beginner's mind, obviously the first one from the quote from the famous quote of his, of course, is, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert mind, there are few. So not knowing is usually what we emphasize when we talk about beginner's mind. The mind that, not knowing, not as doubt, but not knowing as open to possibility, to and it's a huge thing in Zen, not knowing. In fact, we practice to be with not knowing. It's actually a Buddhist thing. We just emphasize it in Zen a lot. And how is it? And if you read Pema Chodron, you also get that, right? How do we rest in not knowing? Because fundamentally, that's life. That's impermanence. That's inconstancy. Remember, a really great word for one of the basic meaning of impermanence as one of the three marks of existence is things are inconstant. And so the irony of our practice, most of us come to practice thinking, oh, I'm going to get more information. I'm going to learn more, and I'm going to just be able to control. I know I came to control myself more, didn't you? Right? I'm unhappy, so I want to figure out how to have a happy mind. I'm not calm, so how can I have a calm mind? And all those things are part of practice to help us balance when those things feel overwhelming. But when we practice, we're practicing to rest actually in the difficulties. This is the hardest part about practice, is resting in the not knowing, which is very difficult for us. Whatever it is that is our difficulty, probably if you really think about it, we perseverate on what we think the difficulty is, but it's the shit that we don't know about it that makes us most discombobulated, wouldn't you say? And if you, part of when we do like a one day or when we're practicing, we see that our struggle is with control, or at least that's my experience. right? How do I control my posture? Oh yeah, all the information. Am I sitting up right? Oh, Reverend Lien came around and readjusted. Oh no, but that can't be right. You know, like, oh no, no, I've been doing this for however long. Where is it that we resist, right? Sometimes I really think that resistance is suffering, is dukkha. And so much of our practice is actually to see where do we resist when we don't need to. Trust me, I'm an activist. Resistance, yeah, right? I'm all for that appropriately. Part of our practice is seeing when are we resisting inappropriate? When is it not useful to resist? And the more and more I practice, the more I realize where I resist is where I need to pay attention. For some of us, it's doing. What was I just watching on TV? Oh, I love to watch cooking shows. Next Level Chef. You know, there was this woman, and she's like, you know, they have a little snippet about people. And she's like, I don't want to be told what to do. If you tell me what to do, we do the opposite. And I was like, girl, you're gonna suffer, right? Especially Gordon Ramsay. Like, that's like, you know, throw that in Gordon Ramsay's face and you will suffer for sure. Mm-hmm. Now, the other thing, though, is that beginner's mind has to include everything. The background includes everything. Big sky includes everything. Buddha nature, we'd like to think is, oh, that's just the pretty part of me or you, right? And then we're supposed to realize each other's Buddha nature, but that's really easy when it's like, oh yeah, she agrees with me or they agree with me. That's their Buddha nature. When I don't agree with them, I don't know what the fuck their Buddha nature is, but it's really hard to find, wouldn't you say? That's when it's difficult to say, oh yeah, here's Buddha in front of me too, right? Or when ourselves is like that. And you know, that's the hardest part. Deb, over the holiday season, wanted to make fudge, vegan fudge, of course. Right? She came home one day with a whole bunch of organic powder sugar. And we had made fudge last year too. So she comes with this bag. I said, we already have a bag. So she said, yeah, I gotta return it. She always buys everything at last minute. So never on sale, you know, and I like to save money, right? So we finally went the other day to go return it, just a couple days ago. I'm shopping and, you know, she comes back and she said, oh, the guy says, you know, when we buy something else, we just do the exchange. So we're up there and he right away calls for a manager to do the return. And then the manager comes and she starts to do, and then she says, oh, it's over 30 days, so I'm sorry. I don't think I can return it, but let me call the super manager to find out. And then she gets on a walkie-talkie, and the whole thing, I have a return here that's over 30 days. Can I do it or not? What is it? It's sugar, right? And so, like the whole store, and everyone's looking at us at the checkout counter. So I'm like, but he told us we can return it, and it's your brand of sugar, and it's unopened. And she's like, I'm really sorry. This is our policy. I said, well, it's a stupid policy. This is your brand, right? And yes. Zen Master Reverend Liēn here. Part of me, no, I didn't think of that, but part of me did notice, and Deb is the nicest person. I would tell you, to me, Deb is a bodhisattva. You guys already know that, right? That's my thought about it. However you think of Deb, that's your thing, but I do think Deb is a bodhisattva. And Deb is totally like, it's okay. It's okay. And I'm getting more and more mad. And part of me is thinking, I'm defending her. And then part of me is also realizing, girl, you were getting mad for nothing, but it just like made me even more mad. And later I realized it's because Deb is so nice. And I know that I'm acting out of control, but just because I know I'm acting out of control made it even worse, right? Actually, I did. And then I was like, I'm never shopping with you again, right? Or we can buy our own food now. That was part of it, right? I know I was out of control, and I just knew it. And then the part, to be honest, because Deb was like, "What can I do? What can I do?" And I'm like, "You can't do anything. Just leave me alone." And I did have some space, but then I got to say to her, and it did take me. I'll be perfectly honest. It took me half a day to get there, where I could actually say to her, "You were just so perfect and nice. And I know I was out of control, but that just made it worse. Not as a blaming for you, but that's just made it worse." Right? So that's the thing, right? It's hard to remember. It's hard to be constant in remembering that I am a Buddha. Charlotte Chocolbeck said, "Oh, grouchy Buddha is Buddha." Right? And I'm like, oh yeah, I loved it when I read it. Maybe she didn't quite say grouchy, but something like irritated Buddha or something like that, right? I have it in quotes somewhere, in a Dharma talk, I think, right? But whatever it was not a nice Buddha, right? And I love that when I read that, because it's like, yeah, everything is acceptable. And I say it to you all the time. It's when we know that, but we can't. When I know that and I can't do it, especially in the middle of it, that's the worst time for me. But when we can take a breath and say, fucking A, I gotta start again, right? I gotta start again. Take a deep breath. Really see it for what it is. Remember the background. The background is, I am not this annoying bitch at the counter, because Dad's like, I don't get mad at them. They're just doing their job. I'm like, fucking right, but I'm still grouchy about it, right? I know, that's true, and you're being so nice. I can't stand it because I don't feel so nice. However, when we are practicing in a container, and this is why the container of practice is really important. We need to be able to investigate when we lose control of how we want to be and who we want to be, right? Because what is my complete commitment as a quality of life? I've told you guys, and I've been thinking about it, trying it on, and vowing and vowing and vowing, is what? Kindness. Kindness is supposed to be drive, my motivation in life. I was not kind to those people. Lose control of holding, being constant, being able to connect to. Right? Then we have to remember that there's more than our overwhelmness, our inability to be with ourselves or others in a way that's how we would like it to be. And we need to go into these containers in which the thing about a 1 day or 3 day or 5 day or 30-minute or 40-minute, you actually need to get to the point in which you're going, fucking A, I am suffering, or this is the shit. If you can't get this, I'm suffering, you're just going, this is bad, I don't like it, Lien, giving me advice, moving me, telling me this is good, or whatever, whoever you want to blame. You can blame me in a retreat, right? That's part of being the teacher. When we stop blaming others or ourselves, then we can really be with not the idea of suffering or the suffering we can control. This is the hard part about practice. is how do we start again? When is it that I'm using the words, the things about beginner's mind that I talked about, not knowing, including everything, starting again, egoless. How did I define egoless last time? Egoless doesn't mean there's no self. Egoless on a certain level means I'm not solidifying against a sense of self. In the midst of that event at the register, there's some part of me that was like knew. It's good to know when you're stuck in that, but it also is good to know that the part that is useful is to remember this is not all I am. This is the only way to forgive myself, I know. Some of you talked about how because of yesterday, where the repeated period where you had, it was short, right? 6 hours. 6 hours, but it's a lot when maybe you're only meditating 20 minutes 3 times a week. But it's and the repetition of the length, right? Not just every day, but the length. It makes a huge difference because essentially the background of all your struggle is that everything is okay. And this is where we have to be able to have confidence in our practice that whatever we think is shit, be it internally or externally, that I don't have any control over or that's killing me or whatever it is, you have to develop some confidence that there's more than this. And if you can't, then you have to be able to remember this will not continue forever. Right? And some of you have talked about that. The one day helped a lot to hold, oh, a flat tire. How are we going to make it home in the storm? Poor Keizen, I was telling some of you here in the room. 3 places we had to go for air. 2 of them did not work. It's pouring rain, and I'm there like, oh, let me help you if you need help. And part of me is going, oh, I'm so glad that they're the one going out there, right? Because it was pouring, right? And I'll tell you, I got home and we had a leak in the roof that Deb had discovered. And so we were dealing with that. And I'll tell you, last night I was depressed. I was just down. And I wasn't distressed about the tire thing. I felt actually, we talked about this, Keizen, where there was like, we were dealing with it. There were moments that was a little like dicey, but we were like, oh, we're so glad we're together. Oh, we're so glad we had practice day. And we were very even keel, all in all, wouldn't you say? Right? I didn't suffer doing it, did you? You can admit if you did. Okay. Yeah. And and I wasn't upset about, I was a little bit upset about the it was stripping on my parents' wooden end thing, and I was worried about it just a little bit. I was not in a big tizzy, but I felt this really deep depression. I really did. I was like just down, energetically just down. And so Deb and I are like, let's go to bed early. We're both just tired. And that's what we said, and she tried. And I'm like, no, I'm just down. Just let me be down. And this is the thing about when we are in a container that reminds us of all that are, all possibilities that we can be, is that it actually brings up stuff that that's all that's there, including stuff that maybe we don't want to know. We forget that's also part of our moods, right? We'll talk more about what moods mean in 2.0 if you don't remember, right? Your general I'll just give it to you. Your general habitual tendencies of the way you're formatted, right? You have more than one format, but many of us have, I don't know, running programs. I'm going into territory analogy. I don't really understand, but you know what I mean. Like you have a mood many moods, in fact. The 5 energies you can consider as moods. So many of us have some that perhaps we're not in there very much, but at certain time, it's going to open us up to it. And the thing we have to remember is that it is not solid and enduring. And it isn't enough to just remember it, though it's really helpful. It has to be that you have to have some point in your practice where you see, you experience a really difficult emotional or mental or physical experience, and you can ride the whole wave of that. It will come, it will just get fucking intense, and then it will ease. Until you meet that moment and ride the wave, in all honesty, your practice only stays at a certain level. It isn't, it's not that you have to fucking suffer like hell. How we hold our suffering as we go is part of practice. And that's so much of what practice is. How do we calibrate? How do we get to that point? And how do we work there? And every retreat, I'll be perfectly honest with you, every retreat will come to that point. It has to, because that's the part where you have to learn, what can I do differently than I've done all the fucking time of my life, or that I habitually do all the time? But you can't think your way through that. You can't read your way through that. You have to meet that. And that's why so much of practice is about being willing to get to that container. And that's why it's courageous practice, which doesn't mean, my first 7 day, I left at the 3 day. Fucking racist incident, no Asian teacher to hold me. So there's a lot of structural stuff, and those are valid, mind you. And I've looked back and said, oh, part of it is I just didn't have enough practice that I could hold my own suffering despite everyone else. Because, yes, there's outside condition that can help. And certainly, the way I teach, I hope to have created beginners that do. At some point, not a lot, but at some point, there will be moments in which we each all have to do it ourselves, because no one can do it for you. How you get to that fucking hard spot, Keiryū, she says, when you're stuck in a corner and you can't get out, that's the moment when practice, really, that's the moment. So there was a lot more I was going to talk about in this chapter, but I didn't get past one paragraph. Let me just go back, because I was going to end on this, and I think it's useful. So the most difficult thing is always to keep your beginner's mind. There is no need to have a deep understanding of Zen. Even though you read much Zen literature, you must read each sentence with a fresh mind. You are the story of Zen. Each sentence, read with a fresh mind. Okay, that was on me. Now back to Suzuki Roshi. You should not say, I know what Zen is. I know who I am. Or I have attained enlightenment. Oh yeah, I got that one covered. Check the checkout counter. I got that one covered. This is also the real secret of the arts. Always be a beginner. Be very, very careful about this point. If you start to practice Zazen, you will begin to appreciate your beginner's mind. It is the secret of Zen practice. Oh, so my last point from last week, of some ways of framing, beginner's mind, is able to be with things as they are. All right. Thank you for listening.